Today we're going to take a look at making 4 different procedural granite textures. This is much more so the countertop variety, not so much the raw rock type, and it can be thrown onto whatever model you like. It's going to be moderately difficult, and this is what our average end node setup is going to look like. Also, if you want to just purchase it, it'll be available on my Gumroad, or you can check it out on my Patreon as well. You might be wondering what exactly granite is. Well, it's an igneous rock that is often found in large amounts, so it's been a really popular construction stone throughout history. If you start looking at pictures of granite, you can see that there are so many different appearances it can take, both in terms of color and shapes. Granite is primarily composed of quartz and feldspars. The bottom right where it says plagioclase, that's another type of feldspar. Quartz most people are familiar with. It can be cloudy or clear. It can have impurities in it. Feldspars are a little bit more complicated. They're actually a group of minerals, and they can be a variety of different colors. Usually they're white, but they can also be blue, brown, gray, green, orange, pink, red, black, yellow, or even colorless. So we can take this wide array of choices into account when we're creating our granite. To set up our scene, I'm going to hit S, Z, and 0.1, and then enter to size it on the Z-axis by a factor of 0.1. Hit Control A and apply that scale. Come over to the modifiers panel, and let's add a bevel modifier. Change the amount to 0.01 and the segments to 3. Then it's either going to be W or right-click to bring up this context menu and just select Shade Smooth. I'm going to come over to the right and change my render engine to cycles. And if you have GPU compute available, select that too. It's not necessary, it'll just go a little faster. Then let's go ahead and delete this light, and let's bring in an HDRI lighting setup. Come over to the world properties and select this yellow circle next to color, and click on environment texture. Then you're going to select open, and just go to where you have some HDRIs saved. I've got some from HDRI Haven, which you can get for free on that website. And I'm going to select Old Hall 1K. Then I'm going to come up to this top left area, change it to my shader editor, and change this to world. And this is my HDRI information right here. I'm going to select this image texture and hit Control T, which is a Node Wrangler shortcut. So if that's not working, you just need to enable it in your preferences there. But I'm going to come to the Z rotation and select 22 degrees. And now I'm all set up. I'm going to hit N to get rid of that shelf. And let's go back to the object. And we don't have a material here. We just need to select our cube. Make sure that's selected. Now we have our material. Let's change this top right to the 3D viewport and make it a little bit bigger. Zoom in and hold down Z. Move your mouse up and you'll be in rendered mode. We can see the HDRI in the background. I'm just going to remove it by coming down to Ray Visibility and unclicking Camera. So now it continues to light our scene, but we don't have it in the background. So to start off, I'm going to bring in a texture coordinate node. And we're going to be coming out of object. So let's just set that up. And I'm going to bring in a noise texture, not a white noise texture, just a regular noise texture, and put it right here. And we're going to be coming out of the color here and going into a separate XYZ. You might be wondering what the difference is between the factor and the color output. The factor is the same as when you take the X channel of this color output. So you can take the X, the Y, or the Z, but you can see when you take the X, it's the same as that factor. I'm going to search for a math node and just place it right after here. And let's switch this to greater than. I'm going to set this at 0.6. This is going to drive 2 of our main textures. I'm going to duplicate this and run out of the Y. And if we look at this here, it's the same kind of thing where it's mostly black and a little bit of white, but it's just a different seed value almost. And I'm going to set this bottom one at 0.575, so a little bit more white. Then I'm going to set this scale on the noise at 2.2. The detail I'm going to change to 8, and the roughness I'm going to change to 0.6. The roughness kind of makes the two sides bleed into each other a little bit more. You can see it if you crank it up more. Just going to move this out of the way for now, but we'll come back to that to mask out some textures. I'm going to bring in a Voronoi node and just hook up the object again to the vector. We're going to be coming out of distance. I guess it doesn't really matter though, because we're going to be changing to distance to edge. So distance is our only output. I'm going to put a noise texture right before here. I keep on searching and selecting white noise because it's the first one it selects now accidentally. So we're going to be coming out of the color here, going into the vector, but we're also going to use a mix RGB to control the amount of influence that this noise texture has on the Voronoi. So just set it up like this, where color is going into color 1, and then object is going into color 2 on this mix RGB. And then we have this setting here where this is like this noise texture isn't even here, and this is like this mix RGB isn't even here. It's like this noise is going right into the Voronoi. So we're going to set this at 0.6. I'm going to hold down Shift and right click and drag through the node setup to create this reroute point here. And I'm going to add in a mapping node and place it right here. And I'm going to adjust the Y under this scale to 3. So now it's stretched along this axis here. And then I'm going to bring in a rotate node, a vector rotate node, and just place it right before here and just set this to 47 degrees. So now, we're scaled up just on this slant here. Then I'm going to come over to this Voronoi and change the scale to 0.8. So our pattern is much larger now. You can see that because I've got the mapping and vector rotate before, not on the Voronoi, but also the noise texture, that the noise is also kind of stretched here. If you didn't want that, you just have to kind of make the noise a separate chain and mix them together in a different way, but it would be similar. You would just kind of go actually like this here, and then you'd have something like that. But I'm going to do it like this. I kind of like this effect it gave me. I'm going to search for a color ramp and just place it right here, and the black is going to move up a very small amount to 0.006, and the white is going to come way down to 0.03. So now we just have these very thin black outlines there. I'm going to grab this noise texture and just duplicate it and just plug object into that vector there. And then I'm going to bring in a color ramp. Just place it right here and run the factor into the color ramp this time. It doesn't really matter how you do this, but this is how you get the exact same as me. Just use the factor output this time. And then we're going to change the black to a position of 0.41 on this slider, and the white is going to come down to 0.63. Then I'm going to bring in a mix RGB and place it right here, but this is actually going to go into the factor, and this color ramp is going to go into color 1, and then I'm going to make the rest of it white. So if you see what I've done here, this bottom part here is just to mask out a portion where I don't want this to appear. Basically, anywhere where there's white or white-ish stuff coming out of here is going to be less of the effect there. So it just kind of gives this cool spotty pattern with that stretch pattern there. Next, I'm going to grab this noise texture and hit Control-Shift-D. That duplicates it while leaving it attached there, a little bit more efficient. And I'm going to come out of the factor again and go into a color ramp here. And this time, I'm going to change the detail to 6. And let's look at this guy here. And we'll adjust the color ramp so the black comes up to 0.38. And the white comes down to 0.7. I'm just going to move these over here just to position them for the next step. I'm going to look at this again and duplicate this color ramp. Just place it afterwards so it's going into color 1. That's already where I want it. And this is going to go into color 2. And we're actually going to separate it using this first mask that I created, just like this. So you can make a few reroute points if you want to make it look a little nicer so you can see what's going on. But effectively what we're doing is we're masking out with this here. We've got this texture coming in where this is appearing black, and this texture coming in where this is appearing white. And that gives us this result right here. I'm going to search for a Musgrave texture, and I'll place it down here. Just run object into that vector there. And we're going to set this, let's take a look at it. We're going to set this scale at 10.6. The detail is going to be 5. The dimension is going to be 0.1. And the linearity is going to be 3, not 106, 10.6. There we go. Then I'm going to search for a color ramp and just place it right after here. And I'm going to bring the white down to 0.49, so it's a little lighter. Then I'm going to bring another color ramp in and place it right there, right afterwards. This is the color ramp from my original project here. You can kind of see I've got the bottom one selected there. Is just barely in the brown area there, and not very bright. You can see the hex code there as well. Then it goes up a couple different shades that are kind of similar, same kind of spot, and then the white is right there. I think I moved one slightly. And then we go to some other brown ones, then slightly darker up here, and then just another white one. You can set it up kind of like this one right here, or you can do it differently, but I'm just going to swap this out right here, and this is what my result looks like. Now I'm going to take this principled BSDF and just attach it to this bottom color ramp right here, and duplicate it with Shift D and place it right in front of this mix RGB, because we're going to plug this into the base color of the other one. Then we're going to mix these both together with Control Shift right click and drag from one to the other, and that's a node wrangler shortcut, so if that's not working, you just need to enable that in preferences. And now we have this mix shader right here, and it's kind of both of those over top of each other, which does look kind of cool. But I'm going to use this greater than node from the beginning and just plug this into the factor, and then we get those two textures separated out. I'm just going to move this back up here, and let's go ahead and lower the roughness for now just to 0, and this one here to 0 as well. This is looking pretty good. The last thing I'm going to do is just create a quick bump map. So I'll use a noise texture for that, and let's just run from object into the vector there. Let's come out of factor, and I'll bring in a math node and set it to greater than. This is going to be pretty low, probably 0.33 is pretty good. And let's change the scale on the noise to 9, and then the detail of 4, the roughness to 1, and the distortion to 1 as well. We can see if we turn this up, we can see the pattern a bit better. This is kind of a nice, easy way to create scratches. And I'm just going to bring in a bump node, place it right after, and make sure it's running into height so that it works properly. We'll run this into the normal on both of these principled BSDFs here. Let's see what that looks like. So there's quite a bit of divots there. Just to turn that down, we can come over here and change this to something like 0.31, maybe. To set up a universal scale for everything, let's hold down Shift and right-click and drag through that node setup, and let's bring in a vector math node. Place it right here and change this to scale. And now we can change this number here, and it'll make everything larger or smaller at once. So just to go over how this is working, we've got this mask up here that's driving these two shaders here, and this mask that's driving this texture and this texture to create this, and then this bump map right down here. Let's name this texture Granite 1, and I'll zoom out a little bit. Hit Shift D, X, and then Control, and you'll snap to that X axis. And I'm just going to move it over a little bit, just out of view for now. And then come over here and hit this Page button. That'll create a new material. Let's just call this one Granite 2. And let's delete everything except for this texture coordinate. Let's start with this texture coordinate node coming out of object, and I'm going to search for a noise texture and just place it right here. We're going to then feed this into a separate XYZ node, and then let's search for a math node and set this to greater than. Let's duplicate this greater than and feed the Y into the bottom one. This top one we'll set to 0.6, and this bottom one we'll leave at 0.5. You can see that these are both just black and white. This one has a lot more black than white, and this one's pretty equal. These are both going to be used to mask out textures later on, just like the last granite we created. And this noise here, let's set this to 2.2 for the scale, 8 for the detail, and 0.6 for the roughness. Next, I'm going to search for a Musgrave node, and again, I'm just going to come out of object there. And let's set the detail to 6, the dimension to 0.1, and the linearity to 3. Then I'm just going to bring in a color ramp and just place it right here. This actually lightens this up a tiny bit. You see the difference here before and after the color ramp is applied. Then coming out of object, let's bring in another noise texture. Just place it right here, and we're going to go out of the factor into the color ramp, into a color ramp rather, and we'll set the black at 0.38, and the white will bring down to 0.81. Next, I'm going to preview the color ramp right here because I'm going to bring in a mix RGB, place it right here, and I just want this to go into color 1, which it automatically does. Then I'll feed this into color 2, and I'm going to use this bottom mask here to mask both of these out so we get both of these textures in conjunction with one another. I'm going to bring in a Voronoi here, and let's just come out of object again here, and I'm going to set this to distance to edge and the scale to 3. Then I'm going to bring in another noise. Actually, I might as well duplicate this one here, and I'm going to bring in a mix RGB and just place it right here. And we want this to be coming out of the color there. I'm just going to run this into color 2 right there. Let's view what this is looking like so far. I'm going to set the scale to 12 and the detail to 6, and then let's set this mix to 0.7. And yeah, that scale on the Voronoi is already set, so that's fine. Then I'm going to bring in a mapping node, just place it right here, and I'm going to set the X to 0.3, so it's kind of stretched horizontally there. Then I'm going to bring in a vector rotate node, and just place it right before there. Let's change this angle to 17, so it's angled just a little bit there. Then I'm going to duplicate this noise texture with Control-Shift-D so it remains attached right here. And let's go to the factor and go into a color ramp. And I'm going to change this scale to 4, the detail to 5, and the roughness to 0.6. And then let's change the color ramp so the black comes up to 0.47 and the white comes down to 0.64. So you can see this interesting texture forming here on the right. I'm going to view from this Voronoi here and bring in a mix RGB, place it right here, and let's just run this color ramp into the factor. And this color 2 should be BC, BC, BC for the hex code. Now I'm going to mix this down here with this texture up here. So I'm going to duplicate this mix RGB and just plug this into the top socket. And this one's going to go into the bottom socket. And then I'm going to set this mix at 0.84. So it's mostly this bottom socket. If we look at that, here's what it looks like. I'm going to add one more strand here with Musgrave, not with Mix RGB, with Musgrave there. And let's set the scale to 10, the detail to 5, the dimension to 0.1, and the linearity we'll leave at 2. That's fine there. Then let's bring in a color ramp and just place it right after there. And that black is going to stay at 0. The white will bring down to 0.49. Next up, I'm going to put a color ramp right after here. And this is the one I used from my original Granite 2 here. It starts off with this kind of dark brown texture right here. And then kind of these lighter brown textures here. I think I moved one there. And then white at about 0.255. Some more browns here. Just lighter sandy colored browns. And this one here, a white again at 0.777. So just going to put that there. And this is going to run into a principled BSDF. I'm going to bring in another color ramp to put after this mix RGB that we set up before. And this is what the one that I used originally looks like. It's got a reddish brown at the very bottom there, and then kind of a dark brown right afterwards. And then some kind of light sandy colors, some white, and another sandy color. So I'll just place that right here. Then I'm going to duplicate this principled BSDF, place it there, then hold down Control, Shift, and right-click and drag from one of these to the other to create this mix shader. And then we're going to use this greater than node back here to plug into the factor to mix these two together. Let's go ahead and change the roughness to 0 on both of these. To finish up this texture, I'm going to create a bump map using a noise texture again, just the same as I did for the last one. Just plug object into vector there. We'll come out of the factor into a math node that we will set to greater than, and we'll set this to 0.33, and then we'll come to the scale here, and let's set this at 9, detail to 4, roughness to 1, and distortion to 1. Then let's feed this into a bump node. Place it right here. Make sure this is going into height so you get that bump information. Then we'll feed that into the normals on both of these principled BSDFs there. Then let's view this. And yeah, now we have little divots. If it's too much, just lower this number here to something like 0.3 or something. You know, it's going to be a little bit more subtle. Lastly, let's make an incision here by holding down Shift and right-clicking and dragging through there. And let's bring in a vector math node and set it to scale. And this will allow us to control the scale of everything at once there. So if we want, we could come up here too and adjust these masks. You know, if we wanted less of that texture, we could really, lower that down. Or we could change the roughness here maybe. It kind of has the same effect almost. And we could also change this mask, although this won't change things as much because this line doesn't have that much influence because of this mix right here. This kind of overpowers this one a little bit to create that one. Okay, we're done with Granite 2. Let's duplicate this here with Shift D, hit X, and just hold down Control so we can snap it to the grid there. Let's click on this guy here and click on this page button. And I'm going to delete everything except for this texture coordinate at the beginning. And we'll call this Granite 3. So once again, let's come out of the object output of the texture coordinate node. And I'm going to bring in a noise texture and just place it right here. We're going to come out of the color and go into a separate XYZ node and then into a math node. And I'm going to change this to greater than. And this is going to be at 0.56. And I'm going to duplicate this and feed Y into this bottom one. And this one is just going to be 0.5. And so, two different maps here. This one's a little bit more black than white. This one's about 50-50 each color. And then let's adjust the scale here so it's 2.2 and the detail to 8. And the roughness we'll set at 0.6 so we get a little bit of the black bleeding into the white and vice versa. Next, I'm going to come out of Object again and bring in a Musgrave texture. I'll just place it right here. And we'll leave the scale at 5. We'll change the detail to 7, the dimension to 0.1, and the linearity to 3. And then I'm going to feed this into a color ramp. And I won't adjust this, but just feeding it into here does lighten it up a little bit. And then we'll bring in another noise texture. Just place it down here and run Object into the vector right here. Then I'm going to bring in a color ramp for this strand down here and feed the factor into there. On the noise, we'll set the scale to 10, the detail to 8, and the roughness is going to be 0.7. So let's just look at this so far. The black on the color ramp will bring up to 0.41, and the white will bring down to 0.76. Then I'm going to look at this color ramp's output here, and I'll bring in a mix RGB and just place it here because I want that to go into color 1 there. This one is going to go into color 2, and we're going to use this second greater than node to mask out this mix here. So we get this mix going on here of these two textures. In the black areas, we get this, and in the white areas, we get this, which equals this. That's just how I think of it. So then I'm going to do one more Musgrave down here, so I might as well grab this one with Control-Shift-D so that it remains attached to my texture coordinate node. And I'll change the scale to 10, or 10.6 actually, the detail to 5, the dimension we'll leave at 0.1, and same with the linearity, we'll leave it 3. And let's just see what that's looking like. I'm going to bring in a color ramp, place it right here, and let's just bring the white down to 0.49. Then I'm going to bring in a color ramp, place it here, And we'll just reset this for now. And I'll place another one right here. And then I'll bring in a principled BSDF to place right after each of these color ramps as well. Then I'm going to mix these two together by holding down Control, Shift, and right-clicking and dragging from one of these to the other to create this mix shader. Then I'm going to use this greater than node back here with the 0.56 to run into the factor here and create the mix between these. I'm going to do a little trick here that's very handy when you're trying to pick colors. So I'm going to split my screen and change this top part to my image editor. I'm going to drag in an image of Granite that I downloaded just off of Google there. And if I go to my top color ramp, I can hit E over this part here and then drag this through and get something for that color ramp. This is the color ramp I eventually decided on after doing a few color picking attempts and then just kind of tweaking a couple of the colors. You know, I've got this color here that almost looks like it has a bit of yellow and green in it, and then white at the top. I'll just show you what this looks like here. We'll take this one off. This one looks a lot more textured. Looks quite cool there, especially this bottom color here with this dark color. That's what we get in these areas. That looked really cool when you change that around. Neat highlight. So that's essentially how I got this. So I was just doing some color picking on various pieces of granite, then choosing some of these points and making them darker or lighter. Then I just made this top one white. I got rid of all these ones at the top. I'm going to close this part up here, and the color ramp that I used for the second one down here actually looks like this. So I've got this, dark brown, almost reddish right here, and then just some kind of sandy colors, and a white here, and a white up here, and just more sandy colors in here. So I'm going to swap that out with this one down here, and you can see that this is that other granite texture. One last thing I'm going to do is create a bump node with another noise texture and a math node. So let's come out of the factor. Let's add a math node in here, and let's just change it to greater than. We'll set this to 0.31. I think that works pretty well. Then for the scale on the noise, we'll change it to 9, the detail to 4, and the roughness and distortion to 1. Then let's bring in a bump node. And just make sure this is going into height. Then we'll feed this into the normals on both of these principled BSDFs. Then let's look at this again. And yeah, there are going to be some little divots now. Let's also make sure to turn down the roughness, maybe even to 0.01. It doesn't have to be all the way down to 0. This is going to be plenty. Lastly, let's hold down Shift and right-click and drag through this beginning section. And let's bring in a vector math node, set this to scale, and now we can control the scale of our marble texture. Granite texture 3 is done. Let's go ahead and Shift X and hold down Control so we can move it over here. And let's go ahead and click that guy again. Click on this page icon. Let's name this Granite Texture 4. And I'm going to delete everything except for that texture coordinate node. So once again, we'll be coming out of the object on the texture coordinate node there. And I'm going to bring in a noise texture, not a white noise texture, just a regular one, to create some masks. And I'm going to feed this into a separate XYZ node and then into a math node, which I will set to greater than. I'm going to grab this greater than and duplicate it. Let's plug Y into the bottom one. Top threshold we'll change to 0.56, but the bottom one we'll leave as is. And for this scale on the noise, let's change this to 2.2, the detail to 8, and the roughness we'll change to 0.6. Let's bring in a Musgrave node. Just go ahead and search for that and plug object into vector. Then I'm going to bring in a color ramp and place it right after here. And then we'll bring in a noise texture. We'll just place it down here. Object is going to feed into that vector there. We'll change the scale to 20, the detail to 6, and the roughness to 0.7. And let's take a look at this guy here. We'll just come out of the factor into a color ramp. We'll set the black to 0.41 and the white is going to go to 0.76. Then let's look out of this color ramp and bring in a mix RGB, place it there, run this color ramp into the bottom, and we'll run this greater than, that's set to 0.5, into this mix here. Let's then just adjust this Musgrave here. The scale, we'll leave it 5, the detail we'll put to 6, the dimension we'll put down to 0.1, and the linearity we'll put at 3. I'm going to grab this Musgrave and Control-Shift-D, so we have another one here that's still connected to the object output there. I'm going to change the scale to 10.6, the detail to 5, the linearity and dimension, actually though, I'm going to leave it 0.1 and 3. Dimension at 0.1, linearity at 3. Then let's grab this Musgrave and run it into a color ramp, and I will bring the white down to 0.49. Then I'm going to bring in a Voronoi, and I'll just place it here. I'm going to leave it on F1 Euclidean and just run the vector in there. And I'm going to bring a noise texture and just place it just upstream of that Voronoi. I'm going to change actually nothing on this scale. And we'll bring in a mix RGB, place it here. I'm going to make a reroute and run this into color 2. I'm going to change it so that the factor is going into color 1. And then I'm going to put a color ramp in between this mix RGB and Voronoi texture. And I'm going to bring the white down a little bit. You can see as I do, it kind of brings that texture in a little bit. I'm going to set this at 0.52. Now I'm going to mix this texture here with this texture down here that I created with the Voronoi. And I'm going to set this at 0.76. So I'm getting mostly the Voronoi and a little bit of that other texture as well. And actually, I'm going to bring this Musgrave down below this Voronoi here. Just makes a bit more sense to me in my head. So now I'm going to bring in a color ramp to place right here, and then just another one to place right here. Then I'm going to bring in a principled BSDF. I'll place it right here, bring the roughness down to 0.05, duplicate that, and we'll just, not like that. We'll set this up with the color going into the base color there again. Then I'm going to mix these two together with Control-Shift, holding down both of those, and right-clicking and dragging from one of these to the other. Then I'll use this greater than to plug into the factor here, and now we can see the mix with everything there. The color ramp I use for this top area is this guy right here. So I'm going to plug this in. You can see on the left, it's got this light blue color right here, and then it goes to black, and then brown, and then some grays, and then just some whites on the top. And you can see that blue color kind of gives us these interesting highlights in here. I really like that. I find it's good not to overdo those more in-your-face colors. Just kind of have a little splash of them here and there, and it goes a long way. This is what I used for my bottom color ramp, and I'll just pop this on there as well. Let's get rid of this one and put this one on there. So you can see it's a darker brown at the bottom with a bit of red in it, and then some light brown sandy colors, a white around 0.255, some more sandy colors, assorted sandy colors, and another white at 0.777. This is the same one I used in a couple of the other granite textures as well. But this is the end texture, except for the bump map. So let's just create that really quickly here. And I'm going to go out of Object, bring in a noise texture. I'll place it right here. Let's come out of the factor into a math node, which we'll set to greater than, and then set it to 0.31 or something similar. We'll set the scale on this noise to 9, the detail to 4, the roughness to 1, and the distortion to 1 as well. Then let's run this into a bump map and make sure it's going into the height and not into the normal. And then let's feed this into the normals on these principled BSDFs here. And there we go. There's granite texture number 4. To allow it to be scalable, let's just make that incision by holding down Shift and right-clicking and dragging through those node noodles there. And I'm going to bring in a math node, a vector math node to be specific, and set it to scale. And now we can scale this up and down. Okay, that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed that and you could understand what I was doing. If you are confused, let me know in the comments and I'll see what I can do to help you out. Thanks a lot for watching though, and take care.